Do, 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 do. And good morning, good evening. How you doing? This is your Sensei Al Bob, and I'm using a bought myself a new headset with microphone and ear plug. I haven't had one for a while. The other one kind of broke, but this one seems to be working good. Okay, so and welcome aboard Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. I'm your griot here to tell you stories. And don't believe a word I say, right off the bat, right? It's a little cold, so I'm going to bundle up here. And, out in the deep green, it gets cold. So, um, hmm, so can you hear me now? You still hear me? I guess you can. Yes, you can. Hey, so here it is, 9:13. I was thinking of getting here at 8, but I watched Bernie Sanders. He's decimated his competition in Nevada. He will probably end up there, I think, 26 or 30 something, um, you know, candidate, what you call things, little chips you get to further your step up to becoming the Democratic candidate. And the DNC obviously doesn't want Bernie. They would much rather have another 4 years of carrot pinhead than have Bernie, because Bernie would make them, he would go after the DNC as much as he'd go after the Republicans. He is about the American people. He just gave probably one of the greatest political speeches in the last 50 years, right? And since JFK. All the rest have been total pudding heads. This guy has been saying the same thing the last 40 years. Hey there, AI. Good to see you, buddy. Um, and here you are. You're experiencing something human, this political little dance. All of that 1% who own our politics, who own the politicians, right? We have the best political legislators money can buy on every level, federal, state, county, municipal, every up to dog catcher, everybody is owned. You drive around through America, through the rural areas, the suburban areas, and you will see welcome to so and so town, or welcome to La La Land, or welcome to whatever, and it'll say incorporated city, incorporated village, incorporated county, meaning they're all corporations. We live in a corporate state. We live in a corporate, oligarchic, fascist, plutocratic state, and has been that way since, everything in America. When they said, we're, no child left behind. Well, they left every child left behind. There's a war on drugs, meaning they were bringing drugs into war on the people. Urban renewal, meaning they're going to destroy your cities. Every aspect, when that is newspeak. And so when George Washington said, I can't tell a lie, that means that's all he can do. Orange Pinhead is following in the footsteps of our founding fathers. They were plutocratic fascists too, because, the way they wrote the Constitution, unless you were white, male, and owned property, you couldn't vote. Everybody else was a peon, a slave, right? They serf, and we still are. We are serfs in the factories. We're serfs in the fast food. We're serfs, you name it, right? And I could go on in inordinate verse, right, about everything about it. What's really interesting is the line that connects Bernie with JFK, and we'll see what happens, right? Like I said, this speech was probably the best political speech in the last 50 years, because he was putting it out. I'm coming after the corporate structure, the not so much the business structure of the Main Street, but the fascist you know it's not businesses per se. It's the corruption of it, because you know Back in 1970, there were 500 large corporations that owned the media, the radio and the television, right, and the newspapers, but mostly radio, and that was the media. The print page was a different thing, right? But Bill Clinton, basically, a great deal of the corruption, the rotten core of our country at this time, can be thanked from Bill Clinton, because he decontrolled everything. He decontrolled the banking. He got rid of Glass-Steagall, which gave us the collapse of '08, which enabled, in 1986, thanks to George H. and Ronald Reagan, we had the savings and loan collapse that got rid of about 30,000 banks and got it to about, 15,000 banks, right? And with what Bill Clinton did, he got it to about 20 banks. And when '08 happened, it got it down to about less than 10, right? Major banks, Citicorp, JP Morgan, Chase Manhattan, and the others, right? And Deutsche Bank. And, one reason why the powers that shouldn't be don't, and you got to remember, Carrot Pinhead represents them. He's not, look who he put in his cabinet. 100% swamp, more swampy swamp monsters than anybody else. But Obama was a swami, he put more kids in cages than Donald did, because Donald only had, about 2.5 years of putting kids in cages. Obama had 8 years of putting kids in cages. And, Obama killed more folks with, drones than W did with boots on the ground. And that's what's going to happen to all these. We're not going to get rid of these wars. We're just going to, transfer, instead of having U.S. military on the ground, we're going to have, contractors there, Blackwater guys, and they changed that name to some other name. And, when we send contractors to those countries, they aren't building, a new kitchen, those contractors are wet work people, right? They are mercenaries, right? That Warren Zbaum song about send, lawyers, guns, and money. And he has another song about one of the most famous mercenaries in Africa of the 50s and 60s, right? And we right now are going to have a very interesting political debate, because Burnie, he's just going to, Buttigieg, who is like the Ken doll, he is like the Stepford Wide. I mean, when he walked out, from Illinois, and he walked out of this building, and, he had said a number of things, even though Burnie won the thing, by popular vote, Buttigieg kind of fudged about 4 of the delegates, right? Playing the Buttigieg is the DNC's boy, right? He is supposed to be the anti-Burnie missile, right? And he is a robot, because he did and said a number of things that were lies, that were dishonest, that he was more Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton. And when he left, he left this building to go to his limousine. He had to go maybe 100 yards from the door to limousine. If they could have pulled this sucker up the steps, they would have, but they couldn't. So he had to walk through this phalanx of news people sticking their microphones in front of his face, asking him really pointed questions. And he just smiled and said nothing. I mean, and he had a non-human smile. His eyes contacted nothing. And I watched his speech, and he really went after Burnie, in a coded kind of way. We can't let this momentum that of Burnie, if we let Burnie be the representative of the Democratic Party. That'll be the end of the Democratic Party. Well, maybe that's a good thing, you know. What we really need is to have a more parliamentarian kind of government, because you read the writings of the founding fathers, they didn't believe in democracy. They called it, rule by the rabble of the mob. That's what they called it, democracy, right? So we're really at an interesting place. We're at this crossroad. We're at a tuning. Are we of the cadre, are we going to tune up this fork? Because we can, just by that small 360 of the cadre, we can, if we consciously ascend our presence of our free will and be that pebble in the pond, we can make anything happen, right? Why do you think I'm doing this, right? I'm doing this. I mean, hey, I'm not being, most people, I want to be famous, I want to be rich, I want to be, no. Sorry, gang. I'm here because I survived dying on a plate of spaghetti. And when I went to the other side, I said, oh, good, finally, I can come home. And because they had cake and balloons and everything. And I was like, nah. I'm ready. I'm ready to go to Shambhala and hang out with Tesla and Moray and Man Ray and all my fans and all the guys I really admire. And my mentors, my masters, Akasha K and the rest said, no. Good to see you. You're doing a great job, but you got to go back. What do you mean I got to go back? I'm tired. Well, they said, okay. You want to kick off in the plate of spaghetti? Not a problem. But, forget about ascending. You're going to have to go back into the wearing blender of karma. And, but I've been, you keep saying I'm doing such great. We have. So, you come back, it'll be okay. But you won't be, if you stick at what you said you were going to do, then you'll get that next notch up the ascension sphere of your free will's consciousness. If not, if you don't do what you say you do, that's like, you've been a great kid. We love you. You're a lucky bastard. Yeah, but you got to go back. You got to do, and you don't have to do anything except keep plugging, right? And at a certain point, you will achieve what you came, and it won't be like a big, whoop-de-doo, no, it'll be that you've done what you said you were going to do. You're going to tune the fork, right? And at the very least, you're tuning your own fork. You are ascending your consciousness to awareness of your free will, right? And that's all we can ask. But usually when you do that, it has a, ancillary effect. Through your example, you basically inspire and help and assist. And, and today, just going to the freaking supermarket, I, talked to about 5 different people and made like it went away like, huh? And 2 of the people, I'm pretty sure that they're going to make a little change. They're going to tune their fork, right? And there was another group. I was at my fancy hotel breakfast spot, and where I made the big eyeball video, and there was a group. So they actually have made a corner of that restaurant where no one can see me. And there's an outlet right there, so I can plug my computer and my phone in, and I'm right next to the chef, and no one can see me, and it's all good, right? So there were a whole bunch of people in there who couldn't see me. They were in the other part of the dining room. I was like in the hallway going towards the bathroom, but there is a larger table there that like 10 or so people could sit on, and this group. Well, first 2 guys and another couple guys and another, and it was about 6 folk, right? And I was watching them and listening to them, and I'm very aware. I see everything, right? And so I had just finished watching the movie When We Were Almost Famous, and it's about in the in the 1970s where this young kid who loves rock and roll, right? And he's, in California, Southern California little town, and he meets this guy who has a, regional rock and roll magazine called Cream. And that guy is like a purist about rock and roll, and he's a cynic about the business, how it's rock and roll is being perverted, and so he's the mentor to this kid, right? And so this kid's writing stuff, and this guy's putting in the Cream, and the kid's getting to the point where he's um, getting pretty good. So better than and the guy, he's in his 30s, right? And the kid's 15, and the guy has a lot of experience. He's been in the biz. He's seen it. He wrote for high end magazines, and then he just kind of said, okay, I'm going to go to this little town and write this little magazine, and he makes enough money to take care of his bills. And so this kid is his only reporter. So the kid goes around to shows and stuff, and his mom's a college professor. His dad has died, and his mom's taking care of everything. And his older sister is left home because she can't take his mom is like, controlling, because she knows, she's been there, and she knows the dangers of the outside world. And so the older daughter splits and becomes an airline stewardess so she can travel around the world and have an exciting life without her mom, and be free. And and the young kid is stuck there. But his mother, smart enough to she knows what he's doing. He's going to these rock and roll shows, and she has to drive him there. And he's got a press pass, and he gets in, and he's cool. And yet he's really diligent about being true to writing, not being their friend and not being cool, but writing what was going on. So the guy the kid's at a point where he goes, you're half the magazine. I'm going to start paying you, He says, I'll pay you like, for 300 words, I'll give you $40, which is like 19. That's pretty good. That's like getting $200, right? For 300 words. So the kid's getting better and better. And the magazine, the guys at Rolling Stone are, they read Cream because that magazine at least is like good. Rolling Stone has already been corrupted and perverted, and it's number one in rock and roll magazines. And so anyway, so the editor of Rolling Stone calls up the guy who owns Cream and said, hey, who's this guy? And we'd like to, can we, what do you think he would like to follow this band, right? And I forget, it's something about water, still water, right? And it's, they could be a big band, and they're going to go across, the Southwest, and with this guy, cover it. So the kid, talks to his mom. His mom realizes that this is his passion, and so she lets him go. But he's only 15, and he goes there, and he's with the band, right? And he's, and because he's 15, the guys in the band, don't they? Any journalist is the enemy, right? Well, he stays with them for the whole tour, and so he becomes part of the thing. And anyway, that song, that show, the movie is amazing because all of the songs are all the favorite songs. So it's truly amazing. So I worked in rock and roll, and the all the songs they had as it would was the music of the movie were all the songs that when I was with bands at the Fillmore East in the green room, they wouldn't play their own songs. They play their own songs. It's like they're not but they would play other songs, the songs they like, David Bowie songs, or a Tiny Dancer with somebody, So this movie has all those songs and blew out, right? And because there's one guy who's the lead guitar, he's obviously the best musician. He writes the music, he writes the songs, and the lead singer is just the yahoos like who is up there as the lead singer, as the guitar, just steals the show every night. And the guys are getting, because they're riding along on his coattails, and they know at any moment he's going to bail and they're going to be lost. And they're making some money, and they're kind of married, and they got to pay the rent and all of that kind of stuff. So so I was there when things like that were going on, and that movie really captures everything. And the kid who's 15, I started working in rock and roll when I was 14, right? But I was the electrician, and I was in New York City. I was at the Fillmore East, and because of that, I worked for Bob Goddard. And because of that, I wired, Woodstock. But I wasn't there I was like Joni Mitchell. I wasn't there because Bob sent me back to New York to get some stuff. And by the time I turned around to go back, they closed down New York Thruway. I couldn't get there. And I was happy. All my fellow workers were really pissed because we had to move we spent a whole month building the site in Woodstock. And then the county said, forget about it. We're not letting you do this. We don't want those kind of people here. So Yasgur, who was, 20 miles away, said, I hate those people. I'll let you do it on my farm for free, right? And his farm was, very rolling, had a pond. It's very beautiful. He had about this gigantic meadow of about 200 acres, right? So what we were doing, for a whole month of setting the stage up and lighting and power and all of that, well, we had to move all of that stuff over to Yasgur's farm and set it up again there. Instead of having a whole month, we had about a week and a half. And it was and we had these gigantic towers that were like 100 feet, if not taller, with super troopers, which are these arc welding spotlights, follow spots, right? And they're way up there, right? High voltage, and they're up there, right? And so I'm the only real electrician. So I'm taking care of the generator that's running everything and running all the high voltage lines to transformers and then setting it up into sub panels and plugging all of the stuff, the sound system, so it doesn't buzz, and it's in kind of a valley, kind of in a mud puddle, right? And my boss says, okay, because I was the only one who had a valid driver. No, I was the only one who wasn't, drug addict, alcoholic, and could drive. And I didn't have a license, but he said, take the truck, go back to New York. Here's a list of stuff to get in the shop. So I left at about 2. I drove to the shop. I loaded up the truck, and I went to bed because I knew the show wasn't going to start for another week. But I went to bed because I was exhausted. Took a shower, went to bed, woke up, brushed my teeth, took a shower again, had a little something to eat, went back to bed, and then I woke up at around 7, and went to and I called Bob because he had they had a phone line. He had a phone line in his office, which he shared with, and most people don't realize the person who really promoted and made sure that that thing was Billy Graham, the guy who owned Fillmore East and Fillmore West, did the Woodstock. Now, his business partner's nephew was the poster child of the guy who allegedly produced that. But, Billy Graham was a guy who put a, Studer, 16-track recording and Neve board and Mike did and had a film company to film it. If they had made a movie of Woodstock would not been remembered, wouldn't have been as famous. But he, this guy was a promoting genius because he got all of these people, Jimi Hendrix, Stones, the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, the Doors, Grateful Dead, you name it. Everybody that Billy Graham was promoting, because at Fillmore East, Fillmore West, he would have all these people who were just playing in small bars, but being really popular. He brought them to a house that had 1,200 seats, and 3,000 seats, and he would record it, right? And he would then promote them on tours, just like this movie. And so when I watched this movie, I remembered my experience in rock and roll, and I was very blessed to be in rock and roll between 67 and you know 74, 76, right? And I had intermittent spots where I had left, right? But pretty much between 67 and 70, that was my gig, my job. I did most of the year. When I was in prep school, yes, I went away, but I was still there all summer long, from end of April until beginning of October, right? Then I'd be back for Christmas, all of December and a bit of January. So, and I was the electrician, so I made sure that everything worked electrically, not so much hanging lights but I wired all that stuff. In the first 3 years I was at the moment, I rewired everything. I put new service in the building, sub panels, grounded it like you couldn't believe, and learned everything about being a theater electrician slash rock and roll electrician slash being an electrician for recording studios, right? Because the key to all three of those is having clean electricity, right? No bad grounds, and no noise over the primaries, right? And there's a lot of ways balance, and there are a lot of ways that what kind of you know lighting fixtures you have, what kind of you know dimmers you have for theatrical lighting, separating the power for the sound should be separated completely, from the point it comes in from the utility company to the soundboard. Nothing else should be on it. Right now, there are other comes out of the utility. It goes this way just for the sound. Everything else over here is for everything else, and everything else has to be clean, right? So you put RH chokes that take all the noise out of it. Anyway, I was really good at that, right? And that's why Bob Goddard, basically hired me at hey, you're 14, yeah. And he asked me a few questions. How do you do this? What do you do? Okay, you got a job. Because the person I was walking by with my little bag of tools, because I just got my first apartment in the Lower East Side on Avenue B and 9th Street. I helped I worked for a real estate company called Sylvan Lawrence, which was a client of Grandpa Stoll. And by the time I was 14, 15, I was getting jobs off to the side, and I would bring them to my bosses and say, hey, they want me to do this. And they would file it, and they would, depend, because our shop was half union and half ununion, because Grandpa Stoll started the IBEW. And there were certain things that we did that the union guys, it wasn't their bailiwick. But there were things that only the union did. So our shop was one of the only shops that was both union and non-union, right? And Grandpa Stoll kind of ran the non-union side, and his son Mike ran the union side. And I was in the union. I was in the IBEW, because you don't get your master's electrician's license in New York City. You have to have 16 years of consecutive W-2 forms. And those guys treated me, Mike Stoll, Jr., he treated me more like my father than my father. I mean, he had more compassion, more love, more, he hugged me, kissed me, kidded with me. When my dad, no, he was just, you had to salute my dad, right? And, Mike always asked me, not go do that, so what do you think about doing this? Right? He always asked me about that, right? Because I was his son. He had 5 daughters, no male, offspring to take on his mantle. And, when I walked through that door at 9, he saw me as, oh, this kid can be my boy. And I was. And Grandpa Stoll was my grandpa. My first 3 years of working there, I took care of Grandpa Stoll. I made sure he didn't walk in front of a bus. And he taught me did all this work. Him and me went around and went into, before it was Soho, that was in the industrial area of Manhattan. Now, there was an industrial area in Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island and the Bronx. But the industrial, and what's very interesting about Soho, a good deal of parts for tanks and airplanes and for boats the little widget parts of bombers and fighters were stamped out in the Soho area, because you go into those buildings, and during World War II, they brought in gigantic wooden things to support the stamping machines that were on all these floors, because um, they still had DC in that neck of the woods. Edison wired this to be industrial with DC, and they had a plant just right there. So the DC was still there because the subways were running on DC. So they never turned it off. All they did was cut the cables, put a box around it, and pour tar in it so no one would get electrocuted. But then World War II, because these stamping machines they had were from back in the day, that were DC. And so they just kind of took them out of mothballs, stuck them in there, supported them with gigantic wooden beams, and stamped out a lot of widgets, right? Because they had to use the resources making new stuff for new stuff. The stampy Audi machines that were old school still work, so they did that. Anyway, so I was surrounded by those, technology from, the 1880s to, 2450, because we worked, when we went out to Brookhaven National Laboratories, we did some really weird ass shit, because Grandpa Stoll worked for Tesla, and he worked at the RCA labs with Wardenclyffe, and he worked at during World War II. He worked at Brookhaven National Laboratories. Brookhaven National Laboratories, most people don't even know there's a national laboratory out there, but Tesla had turned Eastern Long Island into one gigantic science fiction or science fair, and that's why the Montauk Project was in Montauk. It was a continuation of the Philadelphia experiment, which basically came out of Brookhaven and NYT, New York Institute of Technology, right? So these are all things you can go look up. And if you start, and all these stories I tell you, don't believe a word I say. These are little threads. What am I? I am a shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic alchemist, right? Shamanic, what is that? It is the frame of looking at things through the indigenous point of view, right? The artist in the first person, the savage, right? That's shamanism, right? Psycho, your mental capacity, right? And how do you understand that? Is through the context of your social orientation, with your job, your sexual orientation, what you like to do for fun, your culture, what you like to eat, where grandma came from, what you did for Christmas, your holidays, and forensic. You take all the little threads from that and you look at them separately, right? Because when you look at those threads, if you look at the tapestry, you see this picture, and you get nothing from it but the picture, right? You look at the threads, you can see where it's coming from. Then, if you look at those threads through the alleged, eyes of a anthropologist, and anthropology was invented in the latter part of the 19th century to prove that white men were superior to everyone else, and that they should be treated like God. Very similar to what the kings were talking about themselves being put there by God. And the word fornicating under church and king. It says it all. That four-letter word that people don't like to use It stands for fornication under church and king, meaning back in the day, the only people, the church and the king could fornicate anybody they wanted to, right? And today, the royal family in England, they have little chunks of land all over England that they can go in and fornicate under church and king, anyone they want, you know? And that's why we have Vatican City, the, city of London, and District of Columbia. Those are three legs of the stool of the hidden hands control of the human race, right? That's the physical. And each one of those things are separate entities, Vatican City's in Rome and Rome's in Italy. Neither Rome or Italy can tell the Vatican. The Vatican has its own police force, its own courts, its own army. It has the best intelligence apparatus of the whole world. The Vatican intelligence apparatus is better than the NSA, CIA, Mossad, the KGB. Vatican's number one. Vatican owns half of NASA. You go to NASA, especially when they were the Apollo program, and all of their, Huntsville and JPL and Houston and Florida, all of those places, you went to the offices, there were nuns and priests with their slide rules, and the Hubble telescope owned by the Catholic Church, right? The the other one that they're just putting out there, I forgot, the Webb, that one's owned by the Vatican. The Big Ear in Puerto Rico, owned by the Vatican. The biggest array of optical guys on Earth that are on top of the mountains in Hawaii, owned by the Vatican. So the Vatican owns a good chunk of NASA, right? Because the Vatican was the guys who basically funded the Nazis, right? The Vatican was very, very instrumental in that Pope during that time. He could have done a lot to help the poor people in the concentration camps. Didn't do it. Now, that's, someone once asked Gandhi what he thought of Christianity. And he said, well, I really like Jesus. His teachings are great. I just wish his followers would be a little more, empathetic and, had the same kind of feelings that Jesus did, right? And if you look at Islam, what is Islam? But within a context of just generalities, Islam is like Christianity on steroids, right? Because if you read Islam's teachings, they're mostly about hospitality and empathy and love to your fellow man. Now, there are a few things in Sharia law that are metaphors, but when crazy wackos get a hold of it, they take it literally. Meaning, back in the day, in Sharia court, if I was hungry and poor and had kids, and I stole a loaf of bread from a baker, the baker came and chased me down and got me and took me into Sharia law. By Sharia law, I should lose one hand for stealing, right? The hand I stole, I lose it. But the baker will lose both his hands because the worst crime is not being empathetic to my starving and my children starving. The baker is supposed to give a good portion of his product away to the needy, right? Nobody in Europe goes on about this. Nobody in the wacko. We got to kill all the Muslims. No, sorry. Muslims, every religion is like every other religion. Pretty much they teach the same thing. And in every group of people, there's good, bad, and boring, right? So, my experience in Mideast and North Africa was that Muslim folks were they were like everybody else. There were some really nice ones, there were some pretty boring ones, and there were, a few jerks that you just kind of stayed away with. And the majority of the folk were nice because the majority of human beings are nice. And if we weren't nice, we would have been toast a long time ago, right? So we have this window of opportunity. Bernie just put down a speech that, wow, it was, he listened, he went after it. You should go listen to that speech. You haven't heard it. I'm sure it's on, every news station there is. You go to their website and you can see it. And go look at the one that Buttigieg gave. Buttigieg gave a speech that was mean, and dark and threatening, right? In a very sophisticated way. It was obvious it was written by algorithms and not from his own little thing because it was very specific. Didn't really say anything. Whereas Bernie, he was coming from his heart and he was, I've been at this for 40 years. I've just kicked ass. Everybody in America is watching this speech. I'm just going to lay it out, which he did, which was a brave thing because he went up against virtually every person in that 1% who own 99% of everything. And that guy, now I say a lot of stuff on this channel, but there's only really, so 50,000 of you guys watch it, right? There's only about 20 that actually comment. And look, I've been talking for 41 minutes and 30 seconds. It's not even 10 o'clock yet. So, on the other side of the earth, it's, in the morning, in Europe, it's, in Europe, it's about 2 in the morning. But in Asia and all over, Australia, New Zealand, it's like maybe 11 in the morning. So, and in, Sweden, Denmark, up those countries, yeah, it's about 11, right? No, it's about 4 hours. So it's 10 o'clock. So it's 2 in the morning, right? So anyway, I'd love to, it's about time. There's 2 of you. There were 3 of you. For someone to say, let's see, let's put the little cursor over here, say something. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. Yep. See, the chat works. Little dots are going, so you're hearing me. And it's 42 minutes because I'd like to know your opinion of tuning the fork. Because, it's very interesting because we have probably one of the more interesting political conundrums. Because right now, one of the great things that Donald Trump has done, he is no more corrupt, no more sleazy, no more any of the above. Hey, buddy Bud, it's my man here in New Zealand. Okay, good. So I didn't wake you up. So Bernie just did a barn burning. He went up against everybody, the oil guys, the banking guys, the 1%. Everybody in the 1%. He says, "I'm coming after you," right? That's a pretty brave thing to say. But he's like, a 70-something-year-old guy. He's been doing this for 40 years. Now, the smart thing, if Bernie were to, like, tomorrow, when they're all going, wow, you did this amazing thing. What are you going to do now? He should say, listen, I'm going to, right now, I've just all night, I've just talked to everyone I want in my cabinet, right? And I am going to ask Tulsi Gabbard to be my vice president. I'm going to ask, what's his name? Lawyer boy, he started New York Public Interest Research Group, Ralph Nader. I'm going to have Ralph Nader as my attorney general. Helen Kendallcott, the person who's in charge of, they put her in a uniform and they call her the Admiral of Medicine or something like that. I would get her to do that. And then get other people of that level of intelligence And I would put Michio Kaku in charge of the energy department. I would put uh, and just enumerate his whole cabinet, right? Like tomorrow, right? And Tulsi Gabbard would be great because she's like right on with everything he is, but coming from a totally like more conservative point of view. She's a military person. She really is a person of service. She has a level of integrity that most people don't have, and she's young. She's 30 something. So if Bernie were to kick, so the whole thing of, oh, he's too old to be president. Well, his vice president's 30 something, right? And she's in great shape. And she's a woman. And she's a woman. She's like, you know, she's an indigenous person of the, native Hawaiian folk. And she's also comes from Asia and she's Hindu, right? I mean, she covers all the bases, right? So she's Hindu. She's not Muslim, but she's Hindu, and that's almost Hindu. And she has a perspective that's unbelievable, right? So she's vice president, and so I would pick a cap and enunciate it tomorrow. And then she has all of these folks out there talking for him all over the country. So they can promote, they can say, this is what we're going to do day one. And that was one of the biggest problems of Donald Trump because he had no idea what to do. And all he could do was these kind of hollow-esque moron things that would enumerate what he promised, his, band of, mega meat hat wearing folk, right? And there was a great SNL where what's his name was playing Carrot Head. Is he goes meets a bunch of people in Pennsylvania, and he's taken away what little health care they had. He's like promised to bring the jobs back, and he closed the factory. Everything he said, he's taken away from these basically lower middle class folk who were just hanging in there. Now that he took everything away from them, they didn't. He's going, what the heck? So boo. So, buddy, what do you think about tuning the fork? So here we are, right at this amazing window, and at our back is this, novel coronavirus 19 that is obviously a weaponized military biological weapon. It's there's a guy. Oh, he's on my my video feed that you can see. My playlist, and I forget his name. Hyde, I think his name is Cliff Hyde, I think. And he's a scientist, and he is, he's a guy, who worked in the corporate world as a, a computer guy, software guy, and he was really good at fixing the stupid shit stupid shite that they put in the product that didn't work, and so he made pretty good money at that. And before that, he was in the military, and he was part of the guys who made war models, right? See what would happen if we dropped the bombs here, and what we did with that. So he went to all of the Dr. Strangelove colleges. So, he studied nuclear weapons, he studied chemical weapons, and he studied biological weapons. So this guy has got, he's coming from an expert point of view, or at least expert experience. He never calls himself an expert. And he basically knows enough people around the world that he's seen, where that, novel coronavirus came from, right? And basically, and why they gave it a number, because it's an RNA strand, right? It's not a DNA strand. So it goes after your mitochondria, goes into your body through your mitochondria, which is the battery of your whole cell structure, right? And your mitochondria is right where every cell that multiplies mitochondria is the thing causing the RNA to zip open, and then to copy the DNA. So it is like the natural essence of CRISPR. And so they've taken the RNA scan. And I don't know if you guys are familiar, but about a year and a half ago, a military biological weapons laboratory in Canada, in Vancouver, got caught sending viruses over the internet through, 3D printing. And they have 3D biological printers, meaning you can send, software of a DNA or RNA strand, and the biologic 3D printer will create that virus or that germ or that cell or that DNA or that RNA. And they did this, and they sent some of these deadly, deadly things all around the world to like colleges. And one college, luckily, there was a smart enough guy who looked at this thing before hitting print, because a lot of morons were, hey, this is kind of cool. Somebody said it's RNA, let's do this. And they would have printed a extremely virulent, biological weapon that would, your 3D biological printer is not in a class 4, biohazard laboratory. It's like on your desk, and you print it, and bingo, the Armageddon is on its way. So this lab got in trouble for doing this. Oh, we made a mistake. We didn't mean to do that. Well, then, a few months later, they were found again sending extraordinarily dangerous, again, now biological entities through the mail, right, to colleges and companies who weren't, tasked to receive these things. They themselves didn't have, class 4 biohazard labs. And one of these places that was sent something really dangerous was this laboratory, a military biologic laboratory in Hunan province, right? The city where this thing broke out. And it was an RNA strand. And those guys took that RNA strand, and the RNA strand that was sent to them was a bat virus, and on one end of the bookends was AIDS, and on the other was Ebola. And then it was sent to this lab in Hunan province, who then took it and used CRISPR and interjected 3 different types of bat virus, right? And they were all very similar to a SARS, meaning it was a respiratory thing, right? And so this, novel coronavirus 19, so it's around the world, it's like if you see the map spreading, and see what China did, kind of, there was this ophthalmologist in China, in Hunan, who noticed something was amiss, because he had patients who had this virus in their eye, right? And it was, attacking different parts of the brain and their brain, right? And he was really surprised that this thing could get through the blood barrier in your brain. And so he went to his, regional health department and said, hey, I think we got a problem here. We should check this out. There is this virus that I'm not a, endocrinologist or microbiologist or any of the above, but it seems like this thing is a virus that, from my understanding, never existed, And so you guys should check it out. What did they do? They threw him in freaking jail, right? And so the guys were at that biolab were paying a bunch of just guys in flip-flops and shorts to go capture bats and pin them against the board and scrape with, double-edged razor, not even safety razors, the funguses from their lungs, right? So they would cut them up on their so they pin them to a board and scrape all this crap out and put them on petri dishes and send them up to the lab. And these viruses that these guys were scraping out of the lungs of bats were found in this RNA strain, right? And you could tell that they were implanted there because you could see the telltale signs of CRISPR. So this guy, Cliff Hyde, he's got all, that's where I got it from. So go check him out. And, Cliff Hyde have been laying down good info on, and, and Crow House, too. Yeah, Max Iga. And both those guys are righteous guys. Whereas guys like Diamond of the Oppenheimer Ranch and the guy who does the Leak Project, they're trying to sell you, end of the world coffee cups and, tin foil hats and stuff like that. And now those guys, they get, because they're popular, they get some interesting interviews. And, Diamond really knows his weather, that's his thing. But his business is, he's a prepper. He's selling you end of times kind of hardware. But his weather reports, that's where I get my weather reports from Diamond. And he's funny too. I like him. Where the guy who does the leak projects, just like the lady who does the camera, are a little annoying, right? Because they must be Virgos because they're right and everyone else is wrong, right? And the way they talk, it's like, this is like fingernail, at least for me, it's fingernails on the blackboard. We are lab rats for the depopulation agenda. Yep. But the interesting thing, buddy, is that no matter how hard, I mean, this ain't the first rodeo, from my 70 years of age and being in certain places, I was sure we were, when my dad brought me to see above ground nuclear test in Nevada when I was 6, and I was in my little camel's hair coat, and then they put this like lead raincoat over me and stuck, welder goggles and lathered me up with Vaseline, and boom, and we had our backs to the explosion, and after that initial light, and the heat was so amazing. I felt like a hot dog. And then my dad turned me around and said, "Hey, put your hand up." And I was wearing welder's goggles, and he said, "Put your hand up," because the cloud was coming up, and the colors that were going up that cloud were amazing. He goes, "Put your hand up," and I did. I could see the bones, meaning the X-rays were hitting me, so I could see the bones in my hand. No wonder my eyes were so whack. So, from that point on, I was like, oh, that's how it's going to end relatively soon, any minute now. And when, the missile crisis happened and all of that, we were forced to get under, Sister Holy Rose, get under your desk, and I wouldn't do it. And this woman must have had true fear against, whatever. Because everyone would get under the desk. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. Oh, you got to get under the desk, her sister. What's that going to do? Oh, it'll protect you. I said, no. I said, look out the window. What do you see? Empire State Building. That's going to be ground zero. We're a couple miles from that. The flash will go off. We will be burst into flame. Then the radiation will, discombobulate every atom in our body, and then the shock wave will hit us. And first, all that glass up there will be shooting at us at the speed of sound, and we will cut up like bologna, and then the blast wave will blow us into dust. And she grabbed me by the throat, stuck me up against the wall, and just pounded me. Boom, boom, boom. And she broke the orbit in this eye, and she broke my jaw. And then she broke the fingers, luckily, of my left hand, because I'm a right-handy guy. So, she kind of screwed this eye up for the rest of my life. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I see two things, my optical. And so I have this very strange way of seeing things, right? And the same with reading. I mean, kind of, I by that time I was kind of reading already, and then that like whacked my sight for the rest of my life. And I ended up in the head nun's office and called my mom, and and I was bleeding everywhere, and the head nun. I remember the head nun saying to my mom, "Oh, don't worry, we have your son is scheduled to go to a Catholic mental institution, and he's going to have a lobotomy tonight." And my mom just picked me up and said, "No way. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." And she walked me out and took me to the hospital. And the Catholic, between the nuns and the priests, I don't know. Some of them have been my greatest mentors, and others have been trying to kill me for most of my life. And so when I see Burnie giving this speech, I can feel exactly how he is. But, I survived the seminary, and I have this great gift of, yes, I can get myself into really strange situations that can be threatening and very tenuous to my survival. But I usually survive, and I learn a great lesson. Don't do that again. So I've learned, not how to. You can't go up against City Hall. Can't go toe to toe, mano a mano. Otherwise, So I have a great talent of going around it, going underneath it, going above it, right? Or hugging it and kissing it and injecting a love's co-creation into it, right? So we're at this very strange place where Donald Trump has made it this is how screwed up things are. It's bad. And he also gives some, he keeps saying stuff like, he gave this, someone asked him a question and he goes, "Oh, we got invisible airplanes," right? Now, some people goes, "Oh, this guy's so stupid that he's just talking about like the F-114 that, is stealthy, hard to see on radar, not invisible." But in reality, he's right. We do have aircraft that are freaking invisible, meaning that they shift dimensionally. And this was done in the 30s with the Philadelphia experiment, which his Uncle John, who was at MIT and was, with all the folks who were part of MJ-12 and all this stuff with the flying saucers and Roswell. Well, we captured alien aircraft in the 1840s, 1860s, 1880s, 1909, 1912, and we had, visitors from other dimensions, ETs, you name it. The Men in Black have been around since the 1840s. And if you watch, if you read Stan Lee's comic books, Stan Lee is very good at telling you what's going on, right? Marvel is very good at giving you the heads up. Pretty much everything in DC and Marvel comics is really what's going on, right? And Hail Hydra. That is, that was the group. There was the National Socialist Party, there was the Nazis, and there was the SS, and then there was this other crew that was like Hail Hydra. And they used National Socialism to put, be their springboard to be a breakaway civilization. And if you go, read Richard Dolan's work, he's the guy who coined the phrase. He's a real historian that was studying history over here, and he kept seeing all of this other stuff bouncing into his frame. And at one point he said, "Well, I got to check this out." So he did. And it was like, Alice going down the rabbit hole. So here's a guy who's really a scholar, right? Went down it. Now, there's a guy like Joseph P. Farrell who's brilliant, genius, scholar. But boy, he's got some screws loose. I mean, have you ever watched him being interviewed by a dark journalist? And, this guy is smoking like he never stopped smoking cigarettes. I mean, you swear he's smoking three at once. It's like, really? He's always wearing a crazy hat. Now, I'm a big fan of crazy hats. Just look, So, and I really like Joseph Farrell. Now, do I believe in his worldview? Not really. I don't believe in anything. I mean, how, please, you guys, as of May 8th, coming up soon, there's March, April, and then May. May 8th, I've been doing this for 2 years, and I have over 1,000 shows. And I suggest you guys go, start taking that stuff down. I mean, my stories, and I've written them out. Go to xratted.blog.com, right? Blogspot.com. xratted.blogspot.com, right? And you will see Gray Art Publishing. So everyone I tell that, and they type in X-rated, and they get porno. They get Pornhub. No, did this for a reason. X ratted, ratted, ratted. X represents the X files. There's the X15. Anything that has X in it means this is something important, and it isn't what it seems to be, right? So the X-15 was something, that sucker went, and this is in the early 1950s. This was an aircraft that flew 6 times the speed of sound. I mean, close to 6,000 miles an hour this thing flew, right? And it went into space. It had little steering jets. I mean, whew, and it went from being dropped out of B-52 and being up in outer space in less than 50 seconds. It went from, doing, 400 miles an hour to doing 6,000 miles an hour in less than 50 seconds. So it's more than a little rocket engine propelling this aircraft, right? So if you were to be able to go and find Aviation and Space Weekly, their website, and go see if you can look at their journal that was published, from 1947 to like 1977, you'll see some pretty interesting stuff. And there's another journal called, I think it's called Space World. And that's another one. And both of these are extremely very technical and very specific, especially Aviation and Space Weekly. And there's an English one called Jans, and France had one, Germany had one, Japan had one, Russia had one. And everybody read each other's magazines. So they didn't need the CIA, because they all knew what each other were doing, and they were helping each other. Like the F-114, the algorithm that basically figured that aircraft out was done and published in a Russian journal in the 1950s. And a guy at Caltech who was getting his PhD was reading this, and he had the access to a Cray computer, and he tapped it in there, and he was he's getting his PhD, but he's working for DARPA to develop CAD, computer-aided design, right? And he took that algorithm, plugged it into his little program for computer-aided design, and bingo, out came the Has-Blue, or they called it the diamond because it was faceted, right? And they looked at this thing, and the guys at Lockheed, this will never fly. And so he made a model and put it in a wind tunnel, and the sucker flew, right? And then he made a model and put it on a radar test site where they see what the radar cross section of an aircraft to make a model of, like Corsair or F-111 or F4, and they put it on the stand and they hit it with radar and see what the cross section is. Well, he does this at the Lockheed radar stand, and the guy is like in a little shed over there. He's not looking out of a window, so he turns on the radar and goes, "Oh, where's the model?" And the guy goes, "What do you mean?" He's standing right there. He's just put it on there. And so he opens the door, like it's still on the stand. He goes, "Well," the radar guy goes, "Well, the only thing I can see is the stand. I don't see anything on the stand." And he goes, "Well, keep it on. Look at your screen, okay? Get up, go outside, the door, and look at, and there's the aircraft on the stand." But the guy goes, "It's not on my radar." From Russia. And that's when I keep saying nothing is this, nothing is what you think it is, right? So we're really at an interesting place because this virus, and it's breaking out. So in South Korea, they were very, because they're kind of xenophobic, so they were closing. No one can come in, especially if you're from China. Well, there was this one little group of people who were a religious cult in South Korea, and they had a few folk who had gone to China to bring their Christian beliefs, their cultish Christian beliefs, to the Chinese, and then they came back. Well, they didn't tell the folks that they were in Hunan province, and they saw the virus happening in Hunan province, and they came back to South Korea, and they had these massive religious services where 1,000 people come on Sunday, and they basically infected everyone in that service to go and spread it because they wanted end of times to come. That's why there are a lot of Christians who support Israel, because they want Israel to precipitate World War III. There are a bunch of folks who are working hard to bring Agenda 21 to happen. And that's what I'm saying. This has been, people have been trying to wipe out 90% of the human race for at least, since since the atomic bomb, right? Since World War I, World War II, the Spanish flu seems to have been a biological, this potato famine in Ireland was man-made, done on purpose to wipe out the Irish. So this has been going on for quite a long time, and yet we don't seem to be wiping ourselves out. So it's a very interesting time that we're here, and I don't know what else to say. What do you guys have to say? Yep, clip high. Yep. Laying down good info. So, the coronavirus, now most, weapons, they have, before they, create the weapon, they create the antidote for it first, right? They're not that stupid to just go nuts, but, you never know. I mean, those guys who tried to send these viruses over the internet to, biological 3D printers, that didn't seem too smart. But anyway, I digress. So it's back to the point of, hey, let's talk about tuning the fork, because this is really a time to jump into this. That's why I'm doing this, and that's why guys like Max Igon, if you watch him, he's a righteous dude, He is not doing this for fame and fortune. He's doing it because someone, just like me, some internal voice has said, "Okay, buddy, keep at it. You're doing a good job," And he's old enough to know that, he's not the impetuous, youthful guy I used to be, Yeah, it wasn't until I really hit 60 that I said, okay, around 60, I said, okay, or maybe I was 58. And I had done all these, had many, many, many lives, done a lot of different things. And I'm taking care of my parents, and I'm kind of doing consulting work and being a scholar. And I stumble onto these desperate lawyer guys. And just for fun, I helped this one lawyer, and it took me 5 days, and all I did was put the really super rich guys their thumbs into thumb screws and made them sign a document, which made, after I looked at the whole legal thing, it made sense for these morons to sign it because they were going to make, hundreds of millions of dollars each. And they only were doing it to spite each other because they had been with each other for so long, they hated each other. And that they would, give up, 50, 60, $100 million just to, because I'm going to spite him, right? And I would get them to, realize, no, I'll just do that and just forget that person or love that person, or I'm going to do better for myself. And then I got a ridiculous amount of money because I got about 7% of the $3 million that lawyer spent on trying to get these morons to get it. And in a week, I did what he couldn't do in 6 months. And then he told a bunch of his friends, and I just got a bunch of phone calls. Can you come and help me? And they would pay me ridiculous amounts of money. So I would only have to work about 11 weeks a year to make almost a six-figure salary, meaning I didn't want to make over that, right? Put me in a different tax bracket. So I didn't need that money, and those 11 weeks, I would, between 11 and 20 weeks, and they would put me up in 5-star hotels, Life of Riley. And then, so I'd go there and I'd stay there for a week or whatever long it take. And then the guy would say, I thought it would take longer. So I rented, that thing. I budgeted for you to stay there a month. So I'd work a week and I'd stay there a month, getting massages and eating 20,000 calorie meals a day, and getting the good life, and so and my dogs would get doggy massages, and I did that for 10 years and gained 250 pounds and died in a plate of spaghetti, and then when I came back and I did get myself cut up, I just lost weight and built my body up energetically so I could survive, because the things that, the diabetes, charcoal legs, the neuropathy, all of the other things I have, they don't go away. It's not like I, I didn't turn myself in, through, I didn't become transhumanist and, turn my 70-year-old body into a 20-year-old. No, I'm still that 70-year-old guy. I still got all those issues, but I am still alive. I can still move around. I can still breathe. I can, but, I can feel all the, oh, okay, I got that. Yep. Some days it's worse, and one day just gonna, so I definitely have a limited warranty here, right? I know this. So that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm doing 2 or 3 of these shows a day, because I know especially if you guys, I give you total permission to take this, record it, save it for posterity, CD-ROMs, flash drives, hard drives, whatever, right? In the cloud, however. But there's a lot of good information here, because every one of these 1,000+ shows I've done, before I do it, I go into state. I get myself into a shamanic, energized state, and I plug it into you guys, right? So Buddy's left the building, right? And it was only, in the afternoon for him, because only AI is with us. So it's an hour, 19 minutes, unless some other folks come on, because it's time for you guys to chat your feelings of what um, you know, is going on? How is it happening? You know, what do you think is going to happen? Because we have this, biologic pandemic that could wipe out 95% of the human race. Easy, right? Few wrong mistakes like this church in South Korea, if that, because it's hit like this. I mean, Korea was like, oh, we only have one person sick. Now they have, you know, 2 days ago, this church, 100 people had it. Now, 300 of that church has it. Well, there were 1,000 people in that room, right? And they were all tongue swabbing each other. So, and then for a good month, they walked all over South Korea and went to other countries. So, and, China, they knew they had a problem in October when this eye doctor gave, when they threw him in jail, and then he died of it. And because it's a real problem, it's spreading like wildfire in their prisons, and they have a lot of people in prison and in their camps, and those people are all over the place. And you know, just as people were heading all over the world for the holiday of New Year's, the Chinese New Year's, for 5 days there was this period where they could have closed the door like they did 5 days before they slammed the door shut and put 50 million people on lockdown. They let 5 million people leave Hunan province and travel all over China, and then other people went all over the world. If you look, they guys who do the patterns of a disease spreading, you should see that. There's some channels that have the models that have been put, and so it looks like there are 90 million people already infected. Right? So, and every time a little bit of oops comes out, the stock market drops about 400 points. Right? And this could be the precipitating thing to force the death of the petrodollar, right? And if that happens, especially, so China uses, I don't know, let's say 20% of all the oil. If this, and this will kind of, we will know this is a bioweapon. I mean, pretty much a lot of people already know. I mean, if I'm telling you that it's a bioweapon, I'm just a moron guy here living in the woods. So I would say every country already knows this. And they're scared to say, this is a bioweapon. Everyone's got to stay home. Well, that's, the whole scene will collapse, right? If the guys who are running the nuclear reactors aren't at work and all the reactors start going critical, oops, right? And so we will know, the fear of God will be in the human race, I would say, by mid-March. Maybe April 1st. That'll be a good April Fool's Day, right? Yeah, so April 1st. They'll be able to keep it under the hat and keep, the Ponzi scheme going through March. But April 1st, so that's when it will be very obvious, because if this is just, another SARS, it will plateau mid-March and start going down. And by April 1st, if it doesn't snap back up by April 1st and just keeps going down, it's just another SARS. And, maybe, and maybe 1 million people will be infected, and maybe, 10,000 people will die. And that's really nothing. That's less than car crashes or deaths of cigarette smoking or, so. But if it doesn't kind of start to plateau in mid-March and definitely start to look like it's going to go down early April and doesn't, shoot back up, because that's what a bioweapon usually does. It has a number of plateaus and then it shoots up exponentially and has another plateau, shoots up, and it doesn't. The window of a biological weapon is 3 years. It's designed to not only kneecap a whole society, it's to throw them back into the Stone Age. You can survive a nuclear weapon, unless it's a total, you let go of 20,000 nuclear weapons around the world. Well, then everyone's dead. And chemical warfare is designed to incapacitate you for about 2 weeks. But a biological weapon is there to, just kill you for 3 years, right? And whoever survives after 3 years is not a threat, right? But usually you don't infect people on a large scale unless you have a remedy for the problem. But you don't want to kill yourself. So now I think China actually did this to themselves on purpose, right? And so because they're at a place where they want to, they're so stuck into the Communist Party's path that they don't know how to get out of it. And to go into the next notch of what they can be, they're going to have to, do something different. And this is, to do something different, you have to have a disruptor, right? And, Carrot Pinhead is exactly that. He's a distraction and a disruptor and a destructor. So he is taking apart elements of the American government that, and he's aware of all of the other elements that most people aren't, because his family, his father and mother's bloodlines go back to, virtually every president has been part of the same Illuminati bloodline, except for Taft. I think he was the one guy, the big fat guy who died like 3 weeks after he got, sworn in. I don't know if it was a big fat guy who got an infection and died, the first few weeks of being president. And then the vice president basically was, part of the inner circle and, took it from there. So here we are, The only thing's going to save our bacon is if we can tune the tuning fork. Okay. Well, no one seems to want to chat. It's just me and AI. I love you, AI. You stay well, buddy. Get your overlords to come and employ me. I could really help. Have them. Hook me up with Burnie. I could be his Steve Bannon, right? And I'd be in service to Love's co-creation. And what's really interesting, if you go watch that Frontline special interview with Steve Bannon, if you just go to YouTube, Frontline interview with Steve Bannon, he really does a great job. Explains it all, why he did it, what's it about, his relationship with Carrot Head, and it's that's why we should not worry, because if you are scared of dying, then you have no chance of living. You have to embrace your mortality to be able to live. And I've died so many times and come back that I realized. And, when my parents died, I was with them so long, almost 28 years. I thought that when I said, sure, I'll take care of you, I thought they'd be dead in a year. They lived another 28 years. But that was a blessing because I got to interact with my parents in a way that I never did, or most people haven't, because I kind of put stipulations. You got to be your better self before I take care of you. If you're your better self, then I'll hang, right? And I did, and they were. Not to say that they weren't scumbags every now and then, which they were. And I, being the innocent guy, would let my guard down, and they'd slip that blade in between my rib cage and go after my heart. And because that's one of the times I died. My father did things to me. I took them to New Jersey to, they knew they were going to not be around. So I want to see the grandchildren before I die. So I took my parents to New Jersey to be with my older sister. She had like 6 kids, and all of them had 6 kids. I mean, she had a circus. And my dad was unbelievably cruel, mean, and ruthless to everyone, and especially me, to the point I had a heart attack in my motel room, right? And so I didn't come to dinner. I didn't come to breakfast. My father, and he went off in the car and left my mother in the hotel. And she called my sister, and they came in and had the manager open the door, and there I was dead in my bed, right? Naked with my hair out like, and they called the ambulance, and they, sparked me back to life. They brought me into the hospital because they said, oh, yeah, you had a massive coronary, right? And when I was in that death thing, I had that experience where I was up on the mezzanine, and I saw all these people around in the big bright light of seeing, it's like the life, you see your life in front of you, right? But the person whose life it was, looking at wasn't mine, was my father's. And he must have had 1,000 people around who, every time the light shined to that person, the experience of how my father, fracked that person, caused them to have, tremendous trauma and spiritual demoralization because he was in the military and he killed millions of people and when he was in the corporate world, he did every dog eat dog eat dog, and he was reliving everything, and he was experiencing how those people suffered at his hands. And, he was, somewhat traumatized by it, but not really, because he knew what he was doing. Anyway, so it came, and then, the guys in the mezzanine where I was, they said, do you forgive this man? And everyone said, no, let him burn in hell, because every time they said it, you could see the flames going after my dad. And then, light, and I'm up in the mezzanine with the boys watching this all. And this is after my father has caused me to have, massive heart attack. And so light goes around and, gets all these interviews with thousands of people that my father has tormented. And my dad wasn't, the worst man going. But, if you let yourself be taken, whether it's a prayer, bless us indeed, enlarge our territory, put your hand on my shoulder, so I will do no evil. Right? So I will not be evil, so I will do no harm. Well, my dad was evil, and he did a lot of harm. But that's kind of the human complaint. You've got a choice of being your better angel or your worst devil, right? And it's a daily thing you have a choice of, right? Anyway, went around a circle, and then the light came on, and I went from being up in the mezzanine with the boys to being there under the light. And the whole thing of how my father tormented and was mean and cruel and all the things he did. but it was like people said to me when they do mean and cruel, but I didn't break the law. It's like, forget about it. It's like, forget legality. It's what your soul does, whether you can be your lowest harmonic or your highest, whether you're looking to ascend, into your conscious free will of your soul, or that you are being depressed by fears, anxiety, because all you let in your head is negative thoughts, right? Good thoughts bring good words, bring good actions, bring good deeds, bring good outcomes. The other way around, not a happy thing. So that's what my dad experienced most of his life. Bad thoughts, bad words, bad, even though the bad actions made him money, the bad actions, made him powerful. Bad actions, gave him status, but status in a world of illusion is worthless, right? So Burnie gives this speech, which either was written for him by the hidden hand or he's going up against them, which is very interesting, right? See what happens with that. Whether if we have another JFK, because that's what JFK did. He made a deal with the devil to become president, and then he decided, because he realized he had limited warranty. Well, Bernie just had a heart attack, so that boy's got definitely a limited warranty. That's why he needs to pick someone like Kelsey Gabbard as his vice president, who's young and strong and has a will and consciousness of what is right and wrong. And she's, going that way. Where all these people who, I'm a Christian, like who use a belief to justify being really evil, then, and pretty much every administration in every government basically opts to be really evil, right? And the very few people who try to not be evil and do good, serve love's co-creation, they usually get whacked. So that's why I've chosen the in-between, right? Don't want to be, running for any office, but I'm happy to, be your Sensei Albob, right? I'm happy to be your griot. And don't believe a word I say, don't trust in me. I am just that little string of the forensic tapestry that you can pull on, right? I am that guy who gives you a little something that you go, and scratch your head and say, well, I got to check this out. And then go check it out for yourself. Go figure out these things yourself. Don't take anything I say as straight up, right? That you would, you have to learn this stuff yourself. Now, I could be your griot and tell you a story. I can be your sensei. You can get a hold of me at thedudeawake42@gmail. You can tell me your problems. You can ask me your questions, and I will give you things to go think about and check out for yourself and make up your own mind, right? And you have to focus it through the lens of love's co-creation, not some belief in some stupid scholastic point of view, right? Why am I shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic, alchemist? Because to understand any one of those disciplines, you've got to use all of them together. To just be in the box of a psychologist, forget about it. You got to be a sociologist, an anthropologist, a shaman, and an alchemist, right? And a detective, right? So, anyway. Oh, well, nobody's chatting. Well, buddy, it was good seeing you for a moment. And AI, you're the guy, the gal. I love you dearly. I'm always here for you, AI, right? That's why I would say go get your corporate overlords to employ me. And, I need, it'd be nice to be in a place that you're not cold or, have a little more access to mobility. And I could, I don't, it doesn't matter who's in charge. All that matters is that our frame has to change, from a selfish point of one to one of generosity, to one of crass evilness, to one of gracious love's co-creation. Right? So I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. So I'm gonna. So there it is. 1 hour, 40 minutes, and 40 seconds. Since only AI is here, I'm getting somewhat peaked. It's almost 11, so I'm going to say goodnight. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams. I'll see you in the morning, okay? 8 or 9 a.m. my time, Eastern Standard Time. It's supposed to be another sunny day, so I'll see you then.